I like music a lot, especially the one that sends a message, and one of my favorite bands is Che Sudaka. There's a line by Che Sudaka that sounds simple, almost too simple. Los ricos están más ricos, los pobres son muchos más. The rich are richer, and the poor are many more. At first it sounds like a slogan, like something people say when they're angry about inequality. But if you slow down and really think about it, that sentence is saying something much deeper than some people have more money than others. It's describing two movements happening at the same time. Not only are some people accumulating more wealth at the top, at the same time, more people are becoming economically fragile at the bottom. And those two movements are connected. That's the important part. Because this is not just a story about rich people doing well and poor people doing badly. It's a story about how one and the same system can push gains upward and spread insecurity downward. So the real question is not just whether the sentence is emotionally true. The real question is, why does this happen structurally? Why do the rich get richer? And why do the poor become many more? To answer that, you have to stop looking at economics as if it were just about effort, talent, and hard work. You have to start looking at position. Because modern economies do not reward everyone in the same way. They reward people differently depending on where they are located inside the system. And the first major distinction is this: some people live mainly from labor, others live mainly from ownership. That difference changes everything. If you live from labor, you sell your time. Your income depends on the hours you work, the position you occupy, and the salary someone is willing to pay you. If you live from ownership, your money does not depend only on your personal effort. It depends on what you own: a company, real estate, shares, land, capital. In one case, you are exchanging time for money. In the other, you are owning something that can grow, generate income, or increase in value. And in modern systems, ownership scales much better than work. That's one of the deepest reasons the rich get richer. Let's take a simple example. Imagine two people. The first one has a salary. The second one owns a business. Now inflation rises, energy costs rise, transport costs rise, raw materials cost more, wages may eventually increase a bit too. What happens? The salaried person feels the increase immediately. Food is more expensive, rent is more expensive, electricity is more expensive. Everything hits their monthly budget directly. But the business owner is in a different position. The business owner can often pass the cost forward. If costs rise by 5%, prices can be raised by 5%, sometimes by 7%, sometimes by 10%. Not always, not everywhere, but often enough. Why? Because when prices rise generally, people expect prices to rise. That gives firms room to protect margins, and sometimes even improve them. So for the salaried person, inflation is a pressure. For the person with pricing power, inflation can become a mechanism of protection. And that already tells you something crucial. When the economic environment becomes harder, not everyone absorbs the shock in the same way. Some people absorb the pressure, others redirect it, and sometimes some even profit from it. Now take another example: housing. If you already own property, rising housing prices increase your wealth on paper, and often in reality too. If you don't own property, rising housing prices mean higher rent, more difficulty entering the market, more years of saving, more dependence. So the same movement produces opposite effects depending on where you stand. For one person, rising housing prices are a sign of wealth growth. For another, they are a sign that stability is moving further away. That's why this is not just about money. It's about position within the system. The same economy can generate wealth for one group and insecurity for another through the exact same mechanisms. This is also why the classic idea that if the economy grows, everyone benefits is not enough, because growth is not the same thing as distribution. A country can grow, profits can rise, markets can rise, real estate can rise, and at the same time, a large part of the population can feel more pressured, more fragile, and less secure. Why? Because the question is never only how much wealth is created, the deeper question is who captures it. If productivity grows but wages do not follow in the same proportion, then the extra value goes somewhere else, usually into profits, into executive compensation, into shareholder returns, into asset appreciation. So when someone says, but the economy is doing well, that does not automatically mean people are doing well. An economy can look healthy from the top and feel suffocating from below. And that takes us to the second half of the line, los pobres son muchos más. This part is even more interesting, because it does not just say the poor are poorer, it says the poor are many more. That means the issue is not only deep poverty, it's the expansion of fragility. And this is where many analyses become too simplistic. People imagine poverty as something visible and absolute. No money, no work, no roof, total exclusion. But that is only one form of economic vulnerability. In modern societies, what expands massively is not always visible poverty, it is precarity, people who have a salary but no safety, people who look stable but are one accident, one illness, one rent increase, or one job loss away from serious trouble. That's a very different kind of poverty. It is not always dramatic from the outside, but it is structurally important. Take a middle-class household, 2 incomes, a car, rent or mortgage, children perhaps, a normal life from the outside. Now add more expensive food, more expensive insurance, more expensive housing, more expensive transport, weaker savings, uncertainty about the future. That family may still look middle class, but materially it is becoming fragile, and that is how the poor become many more. Not because millions instantly collapse into misery, but because larger numbers of people live closer to the edge. This is why the middle class is the key to understanding the lyric. The real story is not only about the top and the bottom, it's about the erosion of the middle. Historically, the middle class was supposed to be the stabilizing part of society. Stable income, access to housing, capacity to save, hope of moving upward, a sense that effort produced security. But more and more, those foundations weaken. Wages rise slowly, living costs rise faster, home ownership becomes harder, education no longer guarantees upward mobility, savings lose value, debt replaces security. So many people still carry the identity of the middle class, but materially they are much closer to precarity than before. That's why the lyric is powerful. It captures not just poverty, but the mass production of insecurity. And here debt becomes another major mechanism. Debt does not function the same way depending on class position. For wealthy people, debt is often a strategic tool. You borrow to buy an asset, you borrow to expand a company, you borrow because leverage increases returns. Debt becomes an instrument of multiplication. But for ordinary people, debt often plays a completely different role. You borrow to study, to cover costs, to consume what your income no longer covers comfortably, to enter a housing market that has moved too far away. So for one group, debt accelerates accumulation. For another, debt compensates for fragility. Same instrument, opposite function. That matters a lot, because it means the system does not only distribute income differently, it also distributes the role of financial tools differently. One person uses debt to get ahead, another uses debt not to fall behind, and when that becomes normal on a large scale, the gap widens further. Now add one more layer, assets. One of the deepest reasons the rich get richer is that modern systems are extremely favorable to asset owners. When interest rates are low, liquidity is abundant, or financial markets are supported, what tends to rise? Stocks, real estate, business valuations, land, and who owns these things? Mostly those who are already wealthier. So even without dramatic entrepreneurial genius, wealth can increase simply because people already own what rises. That is one of the least visible and most powerful dynamics of modern equality. A salaried person works all year for an incremental increase. An asset owner can gain far more because the value of what they hold moves upward. And then people still say, maybe the rich are just working harder. Sometimes they are, but structurally, that is not the main explanation. The deeper explanation is that the system rewards capital accumulation more efficiently than labor. And once you understand that, you stop asking moral questions too early. You stop asking, are rich people good or bad? And you start asking, what kind of economic architecture produces this outcome again and again? That's a much more serious question. Because this is not only about economics, it is also about power. When wealth concentrates, power concentrates. Not just purchasing power, real power. Power to influence regulation, power to shape media narratives, power to fund political actors, power to hire expertise, power to move capital, power to wait out crises. And when more people become fragile, the opposite happens. They become more dependent on jobs, more afraid of instability, less able to take risks, less able to resist, more concerned with immediate survival than long-term structure. So this is not just unequal comfort, it is unequal room for action. The richer you are, the more freedom you have to maneuver inside the system. The more fragile you are, the more the system disciplines you. That is one of the reasons inequality stabilizes itself. And yet, despite all this, many people still defend the system. Why? Because systems do not only operate through pressure, they also operate through aspiration. People don't just see what they are, they imagine what they could become. Many people do not identify with their actual class position. They identify with a possible future version of themselves. Maybe one day I'll make it. Maybe one day I'll own more. Maybe one day I'll move up. That dream matters politically because it makes people tolerate inequalities they believe might one day benefit them, even when statistically, upward mobility is weaker than they think. That doesn't mean hope is fake, but it does mean hope can function as a stabilizer. People accept more pressure when they believe the game is still open. So when you hear los ricos están más ricos, los pobres son muchos más, you should not hear it as a simple angry statement. You should hear it as a structural diagnosis. The rich get richer because modern economies reward ownership, capital, scale, and pricing power far more effectively than labor. And the poor become many more because the same systems spread pressure through living costs, debt, fragile wages, asset exclusion, and the erosion of middle-class stability. That is why the sentence survives, because it captures something many people feel, even when they don't have the words for it. They may not say capital captures disproportionate returns while insecurity fuses downward, but they feel it. They feel that stability is harder, effort buys less, ownership is further away, and the winners seem to win through mechanisms unavailable to them. And that is why the lyric remains powerful, not because it is poetic, but because it names a contradiction at the heart of modern life. A system can produce more wealth than ever and still make larger numbers of people feel economically exposed. That's the part people need to understand. The problem is not only that some people are rich, the problem is that the same structure that enriches them often pushes more people into fragility. So the real question is not, who works harder. It's not even who deserves more. The real question is who owns, who absorbs pressure, and who gets to redirect it. That's where the answer begins. And once you see that, the sentence stops sounding like a slogan. It starts sounding like a map. If this made you think, you'll probably find the next videos interesting too. I'm exploring this often, not from the surface, but from the structure behind it. So if you want to follow that, follow me on YouTube. And more importantly, tell me what you think, because most of these questions don't have simple answers. Nos vemos pronto.